Oh, hello there. Greetings, culture lovers, and welcome back, faithful Rob Gutierrez. Welcome back to Sentimental Elephants, a musical journey where I like to take us through a trip through the alphabet. We're going through letter by letter for an artist for each letter, and I will tell you a bit about my personal life story through these artists and what their music has meant to me. It's been a few weeks. Apologize for that. Just things kind of happened. Life caught up with me. But I'm back. I'll try and knock out one or two this time out. And we're up to letter O. We've reached the big O. Sorry. Juvenile sense of humor, which runs through my videos. Probably going to be a little bit of a shorter one this time out, but we'll do what we can. It's not quite so many under the letter O, but there's a nice crop here. Obviously, the big O of music, the big O, Roy Orbison, one of the greatest singers who ever lived. Many wonderful songs. Beautiful voice. Oasis, British band from the '90s. Some people can go either way on them, but I love Oasis. They've got a bunch of great records. Another controversial artist, Yoko Ono. Won't quite delve into that, but I've got her box set, and she's a very interesting artist. I haven't actually listened to her stuff in quite some time, but I am glad that I did. It's very intriguing. Another British band from the '90s, Ocean Colour scene. I've just kind of gotten back into them. They had some really great records. The Ohio Players, legendary funk band, some electronic bands, Orb and Orbital, who do some great stuff. Let's see here. Oysterhead, yes, which is a fun little one-off spin-off project. Their one album was really good. What was it? Les Claypool from Primus, Stuart Copeland from The Police, and Trey Anastasio from Fish. If you can check out that album, it's really cool. But we're going to go to one artist that we're going to be featuring today, Mike Oldfield. Yes, good old Mike Oldfield. Staying with progressive rock. I'm just going to briefly touch on his history, as carry on hitting the high points. He was born in 1953 in Reading, England. In his teen years, he was in a folk duo called Sally Angie with his sister Sally Oldfield, who later contributed to some of his solo albums. He was a guitar player for Kevin Ayers, who was the lead singer of the band Soft Machine. He actually also played guitar on a sort of celebrated live album, live concert, which consisted of Kevin Ayers, John Cale, Nico, and Brian Eno. And in there, when that mix was Mike Oldfield on guitar. But when he was, I think, about 18, 19, he was signed by Richard Branson to the then fledgling Virgin Records. Fair argument can be made that the seed of Branson's later fortune, the whole Virgin empire, came from Mike Oldfield and his first album, which was, of course, Tubular Bells, a progressive rock classic. A lot of people probably aren't into progressive rock. Have had this. It's sort of classic late night chill music. It's kind of a masterpiece of the genre, if you like that sort of thing, which quite clearly I do. Very notable. It's a 40-minute, pretty much instrumental piece. It's one long piece on over one side and the second side, back in the vinyl days. And Mike Oldfield plays almost all the instruments. There's some flute, there's some vocals, but he's a multi-instrumentalist. He played over 20 instruments on this album. I think the one thing that he doesn't really play besides woodwinds would be he doesn't play a kit drum. He doesn't like to play full drum kit. Actually, this is over his first few albums. I was thinking about this. There's not a whole lot of percussion kicking it along. There's occasional bits of, there's tuned percussion, and occasional things like shakers and maracas you'll hear on some of the later works, but not really a whole bunch of percussion on those albums. But it's this great score. The opening little piano figure is if you don't know the song or don't know the album, you might recognize that. Most celebratedly, it was used in the soundtrack to William Friedkin's classic horror movie, The Exorcist, and that got a lot of exposure for him, and that's where things kind of really took off. I believe there's an excerpt from the album, like the opening passage, which was released as a single, and I think they did subtitle it "Theme from The Exorcist." It's kind of going all over here on this one. I apologize. I'm not very focused on this one. But yeah, that was his breakout album, and the next three still did quite well. They're not as famous as Tubular Bells, but they're great albums, and they're all along the similar lines of long instrumental passages, mostly limited vocals. What vocals are generally non-verbal vocals, sort of ah and the anu and that sort of thing. But they're actually beautiful albums. Hergest Ridge, I was just listening to, is an amazing piece of work, which is his second album. After that came Amadon, and then after a bit of a break was Incantations. That's it. And these are great, mostly instrumental albums. They're their own kind of classics. They're if you only know the one album and want to look for more of that sort of thing, then those three are also quite good. Now, there's a bit of a change of pace in the next couple of albums. I'm not going to be going through his whole career, but I'm just kind of skimming over the main points of his development. Platinum and QE2 had generally focused more on some shorter pieces. There were like longer form works in those albums, but they weren't like the previous ones of just being one long piece. They were kind of a little more broken down to shorter pieces. Kind of maybe just trying to keep up with the times. It's like punk hit and then new wave, and he wasn't really going to be going down that road, but just kind of an eye towards keeping sort of more a little bit more radio play, perhaps. But they're still very good albums in their own ways. I think the change. The changes, as Sheryl Crow might say, did do him good. Now, next album after that, like I say, I'm not going through this, but this is a significant part, is 5 Miles Out. Now, this is where I came in. This is where I first heard of Mike Oldfield. I was, I guess, when was it? It was like 82, I think? Maybe I was about 12 at the time, so hadn't quite hit high school. But this is where I first heard it, and our local radio station would play songs from it, because again, he started focusing more on, I don't know about focusing more, but he would be putting out short, with the longer pieces, he would be putting out shorter songs. Things could be put on singles rather, and this is where he started properly integrating vocals with lyrics. As I said before, it was mostly non-verbal vocals. Now, there was a passage on Amadon called On Horseback, which was a relatively straightforward song portion within the larger work, and that did have lyrics to it. But mostly, as I say, it was non-verbal vocals. The first song I ever heard from Mike Oldfield was on 5 Miles Out, and it was the song Family Man, which just It actually, seemed like a relatively more straightforward pop single, kind of like, I guess, with Yes, when they reunited a year or two later, and they had Owner of a Lonely Heart. There were, let's say, some twists and turns in it, but there was still, something that would go, fit comfortably on the radio format. But I thought it was a really intriguing single. Big part of that were the vocals from Maggie Riley, and luckily, I think probably the first time I heard it when they announced it, I'm like, what is this? And they did announce it as either Mike Oldfield or Mike Oldfield Group with Maggie Riley on vocals, which was very helpful. It was my first exposure to it. Is like, okay, is Mike Oldfield a woman, or what is it? No, it's like Mike Oldfield, but Maggie Riley is. So I kind of eventually pieced together, okay, Mike Oldfield is this guitar player, and it's his group, and she was doing the vocals. Maggie Riley would be a very big part of these a run of 3 albums. She was on QE2, but she was definitely a big part of sort of my learning about Mike Oldfield and his work coming to my attention. Now, Family Man, I'll just say this. It was later covered by Hall & Oates. My apologies to Hall & Oates fans. I didn't like that cover. I like a lot of stuff that Hall & Oates did, but that particular cover, they changed the ending to it. It just didn't work for me, and for me, it was always going to be the original version. Sometimes like kind of stagger people who say, "Oh yeah, the Hall & Oates song is like it was originally done by Mike Oldfield," and they have no idea who I'm talking about. But it's a great song, a really gutsy vocal from Maggie Riley. Let's see, just going over my notes here. Now again, he had, much like with his first album, he followed it with a couple more albums, 2 or 3 in this case, albums. But there's 2 more albums after 5 Miles Out that were, again, in the similar vein. They brought in a few different vocalists, but Maggie Riley was on all of those. She was on a run of 4 albums, was QE2 and 5 Miles Out. And then after that was Crises, which had the single Moonlight Shadow. Last album she made with him as regular performing with him was Discovery, which had a song called To France on it. There were some other guest vocalists on Crises, including John Anderson from Yes, and I believe Roger Chapman from the group Family was also on that one. Barry Palmer was another vocalist. I'm not too familiar with his other things, but he shows up on a number of Mike Oldfield recordings, and he was the other lead vocalist on the album Discovery. Side note about Discovery, besides To France on it, there's this incredible instrumental piece on this called The Lake. It's one of my absolute favorite instrumental works by him, by Mike Oldfield. And that's pretty much the last regular album that Maggie Riley played on. I'll just kind of yada yada through the rest of his career because he kept putting out albums after that, and many of them really good, and a few others not quite on the same level. But there's a lot of good music after that. He made a couple more sequels or a couple of sequels to Tubular Bells after that. I think the story is he waited until his contract ran out with Virgin, so if he was going to make a sequel to Tubular Bells, none of the money would go to Richard Branson. I guess there was a little bit of bad blood there. But there's a song on Tubular Bells 3. I believe it's Tubular Bells 3 called Man in the Rain. It's kind of similar to Moonlight Shadow, but it's got a different vocalist. But it is on its own an excellent song. I love that one. I just discovered that one late. But again, I'm kind of skimming over the later part of his career. But there's further good music after that. So I just want to touch on a few details, just to hone in on why I love this band, this artist and his various groups and solo recordings just on his own that he made. The reasons why I love them, and a big part of what got me into it, and was why I love those particular 4 albums in the middle in the 80s, is Maggie Riley. She is an incredible singer. She's from Scotland. She used to be in a band before that called Cato Bell. And I don't know, she just kind of came out of nowhere. It's just an amazing voice. After that, she's shown up on a number of recordings from other things, like Run Rig, Simon Nicol from Fairport Convention, Ralph McTell. Those are kind of more like the folk or British folk or folk rock genre. And one of the oddest appearances, which was she did backing vocals on the Sisters of Mercy album, Vision Thing. I'm getting this. I like looking at credits. Maggie Riley, the Maggie Riley, yeah, it was her. She was on that. Kind of wish she did more. I believe she's done at least 1 or 2, or possibly more solo works, but I haven't really found any of them. I primarily know her from her work with Mike Oldfield, and she's just got just such a wonderful voice. It's very passionate. She can do romantic and gentle. She can also, as I say, a very gutsy vocal on Family Man. She's like really rocking out towards the end. It's like man, she's got some huevos to her, and I really love that to her. The fact that she had such a, not just a vocal range of pitch, but also sort of stylistic range, a tonal range. Um, it's just Moonlight Shadow is just one of the most beautiful vocals you can imagine. And saying I was saying that before 5 Miles Out, the vocals were mostly nonverbal. She was on the album before 5 Miles Out, which was QE2, and there's some great nonverbal vocals from her on this one. If you track down the song Sheba, that's a really wonderful piece of music on that. So again, full credit to Maggie Riley as being a big part. But one of the man himself, very Mike Oldfield, incredibly gifted multi-instrumentalist. There's a few people in rock and pop music who are great multi-instrumentalists and can put together entire tracks, or almost or most of the tracks, just by switching instruments. Todd Rundgren, big fan of his. Prince, obviously, great. A lot of great tracks from him, or just him playing everything: drums, guitar, keyboards. Paul McCartney could do it all on his own. Stevie Wonder could do a lot of it on his own. I know he played a lot of drum tracks along with multi-layered keyboards on a lot of his greatest works. But Oldfield was interesting because he did this into long form compositions. And it's like, I'm not sure if anybody in there could do that. It being like it's if a classical composer could also be the entire orchestra, it's more than just a gimmick. He created these wonderful works that I just can really lose myself in. I just find it the spellbinding and the spellbinding these pieces that he created, and almost entirely did them on his own. And like there's anytime a lot of anytime that there was somebody else he'd give credit. I think it might be just the album Amarok, which was just one long composition. It was one of his late 80s ones. I think that's the one where he played literally everything. Whereas Tubular Bells or some flute and some vocals. I think there might have been a little bit of percussion as well that was done by somebody else. But yeah, it's very, very impressive. Beyond the gimmick, I think it's just great music. The one other thing I wanted to touch on, and this stems from a video, a YouTube video from Rick Beato, great maker of YouTube content. A great, I love his videos discussing music. And he had one, and this one kind of a little struck close to home. I kind of saw myself in, where he talked about what he called Gilmoreism. And after David Gilmour, my favorite guitar player, great guitar player for Pink Floyd, where some music fans would say, oh, this, that, or the other vocalist, not vocalist, guitar player, sort of the more virtuoso guitar players say, oh, well, that's just all flash, and give me David Gilmour anytime, or a player like him, which is is the beautiful, what I would call a voice player, not so much of it virtuoso, or but not as much flash, or sort of these dazzling runs, but just being able to hit these notes and have them sound beautiful, and say, oh well, this is all just mindless technique, or just technique for its own sake, and just give me this Gilmour-like sound. And I thought, and Rick Beato was arguing, it's like, there's great music to be that, true, Gilmour is amazing, but there's, you shouldn't knock music just because of having quite so much technique in it. There's beautiful music to be heard in virtuoso players who do this very complicated thing. And I'm not a guitar player, so I'm kind of talking a little out of my depth. But I kind of saw myself a little bit in that, because I would do I'm more of a David Gilmour guy because he is my favorite guitar player. That said, I'm a progressive rock guy. There's some virtuoso players in there. What I call fret burners. Alan Holdsworth, Steve Howe from Yes, Steve Hackett in Genesis kind of does both, but there's some kind of more high velocity stuff that he's done. Uh, and I find beauty and wonder in a lot of different guitar styles. That said, I guess I may be a little bit of a Gilmorist myself. I do tend more towards the voice players. Again, obviously David Gilmour, but Steve Rothery from Marillion is my favorite, which is my favorite band. I recently discovered, I mentioned virtuoso players. Robert Fripp is kind of a virtuoso player, although he's got a very signature sound as well, and he's coming from a left field sort of perspective. But I was saying, back on the more voice guitar style guitar players, as I say, recently discovered Jan Ackerman from Focus, great Dutch player, and that's beautiful sound to it. For that, the relevance to this is I would probably put Oldfield as a voice guitar player, and that's one of the things that keeps bringing me back to his music. It's what I call his sound is what I call signature. It's very distinct. You just hear one of his passages of more melodic passages. It's like, that's Mike Oldfield. It's as I say, it's melodic. It's kind of emotional playing. Like I say, that's what keeps me coming back. I mean, I'll just go to it. I'll listen to this long formed piece, and usually it's great on its own right. But I'm gonna be waiting for that beautiful Mike Oldfield sound. So again, Mike Oldfield. If you're only familiar with either the '80s singles, or if you're only familiar with Tubular Bells, it's a lot of great stuff to check out. Please do so. So hopefully I'm going to try and get one more in this evening. But if I don't, I will see you still, hopefully not too long, for the letter P. Thank you, and thanks for sticking with me. Bye-bye.